What kind of woman walks barefoot through a winter storm, leaving bloody footprints behind her? That was the first question that struck Daniel Reed the moment he saw her, because no sane person should have been outside in that kind of cold, let alone without shoes. The wind screamed down the empty street of Silver Creek like a wild animal. December of 1875 had brought the harshest winter the valley had seen in years. Snow fell thick and heavy, piling up on rooftops and blurring the edges of the wooden buildings until the town looked like a ghost of itself. Not a soul walked the main road. Even the saloon, usually loud at all hours, sounded muted behind the storm. Daniel guided his horse slowly down the street, pulling his coat tighter around his broad shoulders. He'd only come for supplies, hoping to outrun the worst of the storm before heading back to his ranch. At 32, he had the look of a man the land had carved itself, square jaw, steady hands, and eyes that held too many memories. The war had taken his youth, and the fever 3 years ago had taken his wife and little boy. What loneliness hadn't taken, the frontier had swallowed. He was ready to head home when he saw movement ahead. At first, he thought the snow was playing tricks on him, but then he saw her, stumbling along the wooden walkway, head down, arms wrapped tight around her thin body. A woman. Out here. In this. And she wasn't wearing shoes. Daniel felt a sharp jolt in his gut. Her bare feet sank into the snow, leaving behind dark, uneven spots he knew were blood. Her dress, a once decent blue calico, hung in torn shreds around her legs. Her hair, dark and tangled, whipped across her face in the wind. "Jesus," he muttered, swinging off his horse without even thinking. He approached her like he would a spooked horse, slow and careful. "Ma'am?" he called over the wind. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She didn't answer. She didn't even lift her head. Her steps were uneven, like she was fighting not to collapse. When he stepped closer, he saw her legs shaking with each step. "Ma'am," he said again, now right in front of her. She finally lifted her face. Hazel eyes. Wide, wild, scared. And behind all of that, a stubborn defiance that made his chest tighten. She looked young, early 20s maybe. Dirt streaked her cheeks, her lips were blue with cold, and her breath came out in uneven gasps. "I'm fine," she whispered, but the way her body swayed said the opposite. Her knees buckled. Daniel lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, like someone who had gone too long without food. He held her steady, keeping her on her feet. "Easy," he said softly. "I've got you." She tried to pull away, weak as she was. I can't. I don't need." "You don't need what?" "Help," Daniel said more sharply than he intended. "You can't walk another step, and you know it." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Daniel made his decision in an instant. He slid one arm behind her back, the other under her knees, and lifted her into his arms. She gave a soft gasp of surprise, her fingers curling weakly into his coat. "Put me down," she whispered. "Please, I don't have money for a bed." Quote, "You don't need money," Daniel said, already turning toward the closest warm building, Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. "You need warmth before your feet freeze clean off." She didn't fight him after that. Maybe she didn't have the strength. Maybe she finally realized he wasn't going to leave her to die in the snow. Daniel pushed open the boarding house door with his shoulder. Warm air washed over them, almost dizzying after the bitter cold. Mrs. Henderson looked up from her knitting, her face going pale at the sight. "Mr. Reed, what on earth?" "Found her outside," Daniel said. "She needs a room." Mrs. Henderson stood, crossing her arms. "Does she have money?" Quote, Daniel felt the woman in his arms tense. "I'll pay," he said. "And her name?" Mrs. Henderson pressed. "Her business in Silver Creek?" "I run a respectable establishment, and I won't take in any stray who wanders in barefoot and half-dressed." The woman stirred weakly. "My name is Clara Monroe. I'm not running from the law. And I have no husband." "No husband, Mrs." Henderson repeated, as if that explained everything she needed to know. A young woman alone in winter, with no money? Mr. Reed, I'm sorry, but I can't. What would the town say? Daniel clenched his jaw. They'd say you turned away a woman freezing to death. They'd say you were harboring a woman of questionable character. She shot back. Clara's eyes lowered. Maybe a laugh, maybe a sob. Please, she whispered, just put me down. I'll figure something out. But Daniel already knew she wouldn't. She couldn't even stand. He nodded once curtly. Fine. Good evening, Mrs. Henderson. He carried Clara back into the storm. She shivered violently in his arms as he placed her gently on his horse and mounted behind her, his arms wrapping around her to hold her steady. What are you doing? She whispered. Taking you somewhere warm, Daniel said. My ranch is 3 miles out. Think you can stay awake that long? She was silent for a long time. Why? She finally asked, voice breaking. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Daniel clicked his tongue and guided his horse into the storm. Maybe not, he said, but I know what happens to people alone in weather like this, and I'm not letting that happen to you. Clara leaned back against him, too exhausted to fight anymore. He tried not to notice how natural it felt to hold her. Tried not to wonder where she'd come from, or what she'd been running from. The storm swallowed them whole as they rode into the white wasteland. What kind of past leaves a woman walking barefoot through winter, with bruises hidden under her torn dress? That was the question that kept echoing in Daniel Reed's mind long after he carried Clara Monroe into his warm ranch house. She drifted in and out of consciousness on the ride home. Every few minutes she whispered something he couldn't quite understand. Once she said, Papa. I'm sorry. Another time she whispered a name he didn't recognize. By the time they reached the ranch, her body was limp against his. Daniel swung off his horse and gathered her in his arms. The wind had picked up again, driving snow sideways like needles. He kicked the door open and stepped into the warm glow of his main room, grateful he'd banked the fire before leaving. He laid her gently on the sofa, then rushed to add more wood to the hearth until flames roared up, pushing heat through the room. Only then did he see how bad things truly were. Her feet were cut and raw, bleeding through the thin layer of snow that clung to her skin. The bruises on her ankles and arms were dark and ugly. Her dress was torn in places that made Daniel's stomach twist. Someone had hurt her. And not once. Daniel clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. Getting angry wouldn't help her right now. He fetched warm water, clean cloths and bandages, then knelt beside her. I need to clean your feet, he said. It's going to hurt. Her eyes fluttered open. Everything already hurts, she whispered. What's a little more? She tried to smile, but it broke his heart more than any tears could have. Daniel worked slowly, gently, careful not to cause her more pain than he had to. She winced, gasped, bit her lip until she drew blood, but she didn't complain. Her feet were small and soft beneath the damage, not made for harsh walking. Whatever had pushed her out into the cold must have been desperate. There, he said quietly, once her feet were wrapped. That should help for now. Are you hurt anywhere else? Quote. She shook her head too fast. I'm just tired, so tired. I know, Daniel said. Let's get you to bed. He lifted her again. This time, she didn't protest. She rested her head against his chest, like she trusted him, like she had no strength left for anything else. The guest room hadn't been used in years, but the sheets were clean. He set her down gently on the bed. She blinked up at him through exhaustion. Thank you, she whispered. I'll be gone in the morning. I won't be a burden. We'll see about that in the morning, Daniel replied softly. Rest now. He turned to go, but her fingers curled weakly around his sleeve. Why? She asked again. Really, why help me? Daniel looked down at her. A stranger. A broken woman. A woman who had walked barefoot through a blizzard and still had enough pride left to ask why anyone would bother saving her. Because everybody needs kindness sometimes, he said quietly, even from strangers. He closed the door gently behind him. Daniel didn't sleep at all that night. He sat by the fire with his rifle across his lap. watching shadows move across the walls and listening for any sound from the guest room. Years of war had made him a light sleeper, and years of loss had made him cautious. But tonight was different. He wasn't guarding himself. He was guarding her. Morning sunlight seeped through the windows when he finally heard movement. A soft, hesitant shuffling from down the hall. Daniel stood and headed toward the kitchen. Clara appeared in the doorway wearing the nightgown he'd left for her. One of Mary's. His breath caught for a moment, surprised by the ache that stirred in his chest. Not pain, not grief. Something else. "You should be resting," Daniel said, looking away to give her privacy. "I've rested enough," Clara replied, but her grip on the doorframe told him otherwise. "I should thank you properly, Mr. Reed, and then I'll be on my way." Daniel slammed his coffee cup down harder than he meant to. "On your way, where exactly?" he asked. "In case you didn't notice, there's 3 feet of snow out there, and your feet are held together by bandages and prayer." "It's not your concern," she said stiffly. "It became my concern when I carried you out of that storm," Daniel answered. "Sit down before you fall down." For a moment he thought she'd argue. Then her shoulders sagged. She sank carefully into the chair he pulled out for her. Daniel poured her coffee and set a plate of biscuits and bacon in front of her. She stared at the food as if she didn't know what to do with something so simple. "I can work," she said quickly. "I'm not looking for charity. I can cook, clean, mend. I know herbs, healing herbs. My mother taught me before she—" Her voice faded. Daniel sat across from her. "Where are you from, Clara?" "Pennsylvania," she said slowly. "My father is a minister there, a strict one." Quote. Daniel nodded. "Your father's the reason you were out in the snow?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "He wanted me to marry someone, a man I didn't choose. A widower with 4 children who needed a mother. He said it was God's will." "And you ran." "I ran," she whispered. "I took what little money I had. Bought a train ticket west. I thought I could find work. But things did not go as planned." "How long have you been traveling alone?" 3 weeks. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. 3 weeks. That explained her bruises, her exhaustion, her terror. "And you ended up in Silver Creek because?" "Because the man who gave me a ride lied. He said he was going to Denver. He dropped me at the edge of town, told me I could earn my keep at the saloon." She swallowed hard. "I left before he could finish the suggestion." Daniel's jaw clenched, hard. "You won't be going back there," he said. Clara lifted her chin, trying to hide the fear still in her eyes. "I meant what I said," she told him. "I'll work for my keep. I'm not afraid of hard work." Quote. Daniel leaned back, studying her. This woman, a lost, desperate stranger he'd found half frozen in the snow, had more grit than most men he knew. He should send her to town once the roads cleared. He should avoid getting tangled up in whatever mess she was running from. But instead, he heard himself say, "You can stay until your feet heal, work for room and board, but there are conditions." Clara blinked. "What conditions?" "You don't go to town alone, not yet. People there, they talk. And you tell me if anyone bothers you. You tell me immediately." She nodded slowly. "And one more thing," Daniel added. "The guest room is yours. This arrangement is strictly business, Miss Monroe. I'm not looking for complications." Something flickered across her face. Relief. And something else he couldn't quite place. "I understand," she said softly. "Perfectly." For the first time since he'd found her in the snow, Daniel finally let himself breathe. What kind of fate brings 2 broken lives together on a winter night, only for danger to come looking for them in the spring? That was the question Daniel Reed asked himself weeks after bringing Clara Monroe into his home and into his heart. Clara had been with him for just over a month now, and everything about the ranch had changed. The house felt warmer. The days felt easier. His meals tasted better. Even the quiet didn't feel so empty anymore. It wasn't that she tried to fill the silence. She didn't. She simply existed in it with him, humming softly while she worked, asking gentle questions about ranch life, tending to small things he'd forgotten to care about. She moved slowly at first, careful with her healing feet, but within days, she worked alongside him like she'd belonged there all along. Daniel tried to keep things simple. Tried to remind himself she was just his housekeeper. But every time she looked at him with those soft hazel eyes full of gratitude and hidden sadness, something inside him shifted. One morning, Daniel found Clara outside feeding the chickens. The snow was melting now, leaving patches of cold brown earth. Spring was fighting its way into Silver Creek, and Clara's cheeks carried a pink glow from the crisp air. "You're moving well today," Daniel said gently. She smiled, brushing hair from her face. "My feet don't hurt as much thanks to you." "Your feet healed because you're stubborn," Daniel replied. "You didn't let the pain stop you." She laughed softly, and Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest. But the peaceful morning didn't last. Jake, one of his ranch hands, came running from the barn, breathless. "Boss, riders comin', 5 of 'em." Daniel's entire body tensed. He stepped in front of Clara slightly, an instinct he didn't bother fighting. When the riders approached, Daniel recognized the man in front. Royce Dalton, wealthy land grabber. Ruthless. A man who thought half the valley belonged to him. Dalton's pale eyes slid over Clara slow enough to make Daniel's jaw clench. "Well, well," Dalton said. Rumors were true. Reed brought home a stray. Clara stiffened but said nothing. "She works here, that's all," Daniel said. Dalton smirked. "Oh, is that what they're calling it these days? Housekeeper, is she?" Clara stepped forward before Daniel could stop her. "I am Mr. Reed's housekeeper," she said firmly. "Nothing more." Dalton chuckled. "Sure, and I suppose the whole town will believe that." Daniel's voice dropped low. "Watch your tongue." "Or what?" Dalton taunted. "You'll defend a lady's honor?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes said enough. Dalton turned to Clara again. "You ever get tired of Reed here? My door is open. Always room at my place for a pretty thing who knows her way around a man's home." Clara flinched, and Daniel stepped forward, fury rising hot in his chest. "Get off my land," Daniel warned. Dalton smiled slow and cold. "You'll regret this, Reed. You're on the wrong side of progress." Then he turned his horse and rode away, his men following. Clara's hands were shaking. Daniel put his hands on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I've met men like him before," Clara whispered. "Men who think they can take whatever they want." "You're safe here," Daniel said. "With me." But even as he said it, he knew Dalton wasn't finished. 2 weeks passed and the valley thawed with spring. Clara healed. Clara learned. Clara grew braver. She had begun helping the families nearby with herbal remedies. Women came to her quietly for help with coughs, fevers, childbirth worries. Word spread. Respect followed. For the first time in her life, Clara felt useful, wanted, needed. And Daniel was changing too. He found himself watching her when she didn't notice. Listening for her laugh. Waiting for her voice in the mornings. He fought it at first, hard. He had lost too much before. Loving again felt like stepping off a cliff with no ground in sight. But the cliff didn't scare him as much as imagining his life without her. One quiet evening after dinner, they stood together outside watching the sun dip behind the hills. Clara's shawl fluttered in the breeze, and Daniel stepped closer, offering his warmth. "I never thanked you properly," Clara said quietly, "for saving me that night." "You don't owe me anything," Daniel replied. "I owe you everything," she whispered. Daniel looked down at her, really looked, and something inside him broke loose. "Clara," he said softly. "I—" Before he could finish, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, a question. Daniel answered without hesitation, pulling her closer, feeling her melt against him. When they finally pulled apart, Clara's cheeks were flushed, her breath unsteady. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," Daniel whispered. "Don't ever be sorry for that." They kissed again, deeper this time, The kind of kiss that rewrites the story of two lives. But the moment didn't last. A horse's scream shattered the silence. Then the glow of fire lit the sky. Daniel jerked back, heart dropping. "The barn," he said. "Fire!" Clara grabbed his sleeve. "Dalton?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. He ran for his rifle. Jake and Sam dashed from their quarters, shouting warnings. Clara raced behind them, but Daniel grabbed her arm. "Stay back!" "No," Clara said. "Not this time." Quote. Before he could argue, something heavy crashed through the living room window. A lit torch. Flames burst across the floor. Clara screamed. Daniel stomped the fire. Sam threw water. Jake shouted for help. Outside, Dalton's voice echoed across the yard. "Last chance, Reed! Sign over the ranch or burn with it." Daniel fired a warning shot. A bullet answered. Chaos exploded. Clara sprinted outside only to be grabbed by one of Dalton's men. She fought hard, kicking, twisting, biting, but he dragged her toward a horse. "Let go of me!" she cried. A gunshot cracked. The man dropped beside her. Sam Cooper appeared, gripping his rifle. "Inside, girl! Move!" But Clara didn't run. She grabbed a fallen torch and hurled it at another attacker who lunged for Daniel. Daniel shot the man clean off his feet. Then, more shouting. More gunshots. Sheriff Daniels and his deputies thundered into the yard. "Drop your weapons!" the sheriff roared. "Dalton, this ends now!" Dalton fired one last shot, then fled into the night with his remaining men. But the barn was saved. The house, barely damaged. Clara found Daniel in the smoke, chest heaving. He pulled her into his arms without a word and held her like he might never let go. "You're safe," he breathed. "You're safe. I've got you." Clara buried her face in his chest. "Daniel, he'll keep coming." "Let him," Daniel said. "He won't get near you again." Clara looked up at him, shaking, frightened, but full of something else too. "Love." Daniel touched her cheek gently. "Clara, marry me." She froze. "Daniel, marry me," he repeated softly. "I want to protect you, stand with you, build a life with you. I want you. All of you." Clara's eyes filled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Daniel, I'll marry you." Daniel kissed her hard, fierce, grateful. "Then tomorrow," he said. First thing. And under the last stars before dawn, they held each other tight, knowing the storm wasn't over, that together they could face anything.